No, thank you for coming to Voyageurs National Park. I hope that you find this to be a great opportunity. I know one of the things that I hope that you'll find is that we have the best campsites in all of the National Park Service, of all of the areas across the national parks in the U.S. and everything. Because every single one of them is a lakefront campsite.
Okay.
Yeah, they're very nice. So, Voyageurs National Park, created in 1975. So the purpose for the creation of Voyageurs National Park is actually to maintain a landscape reminiscent to what the Voyageurs would have seen in the 1700s, 1800s as they traveled through the area, opening up basically the North American continent to more and more European development. But a unique element of that is the combination and the connection of the two cultures of the Europeans that were coming over and then the Native Americans that they were interacting with. And this is a place where definitely the knowledge that the Native Americans were able to impart to the Europeans assured that they could survive and ultimately thrive in the area and everything. So it's unique in that way. And the woods, water, and wildlife of the place is still pretty much intact. We, Voyageurs National Park, the only national park site in the lower 48 states where wolves did not have to be reintroduced. We still have our native population.
Oh, that's great.
There's been a movement ever since the early 1900s actually to protect the boundary waters area of northeastern Minnesota and northwestern Ontario. You can go from here 250 miles to the east and not cross another town, not cross a road. And actually you can travel that entire distance from here to Grand Portage National Monument in Grand Portage, Minnesota, all by water.
That's cool.
Last year, there was a gentleman who solo paddleboarded it, and it was the first time anyone ever did that. I think it took him about 5 to 6 days to do
Paddleboard? Like stand-up paddleboard?
stand-up paddleboard. He probably has great abs.
I paddleboard, but I don't think I could do that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Holy cow.
2 winters ago, we had a woman who solo skijored it. Skijoring is when you put a harness on and you cross-country ski while your dog is sort of pulling you along as well.
Oh, wow.
And then we also had a gentleman who also solo cross-country skied it a couple of years ago. But just imagine a place that you can travel for 250 miles from International Falls, basically, International Falls, Minnesota to Grand Portage, Minnesota, and completely be in a wilderness and everything. It's just, it is a wild place. And the waters of this place have been the highways for the longest time and stuff. For the Ojibwe, for the Voyageurs, for the loggers who depended upon the water to transport the logs eventually to mills and things like that. And now for recreation too. Matter of fact, recreation started here in the 1920s, just before the Great Depression. Matter of fact, I was talking to some people that, you know, Chicago, Indianapolis, a lot of places from Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, they were coming up here to escape the summer heat in the cities and things like that. So recreation started in the 1920s. Then, of course, it took a downturn because of the Depression. But there was still a lot of activity here because there was a lot of illegal alcohol coming through the area. And then after the Depression and after World War II, that was another wave of early recreation in the area and things. And one of the things that I love the most as you go out here, and you don't really get the feel for it here because this is not a developed area, but if you leave International Falls or if you leave Tabtogama, which is another gateway community, you leave the developed shoreline behind, and then all of a sudden you just go along for miles with an undeveloped shoreline, and you'll experience that all the way as you go out to your campsite today and everything. There might be a lot of boat activity out there because it's a very popular place to fish, but after about 5 o'clock, the last boats go in and you feel like you have the lake to yourself. And could you imagine just being a Voyager or an Ojibwe person traveling through the area, spiking camp for the night? And then you get the amazing stars, hopefully Depends on what the weather's going to be like. Yeah, hopefully.
Knock on wood.
But then the natural sounds too. Loons calling. And if you're lucky, you might even hear wolves howling. So I hope you enjoy your time here. And as a commemorative for coming to Voyageurs National Park, and I know you're all from different states. As a matter of fact, do you mind going around and telling what states you're from? Do you want to start?
Stephanie, Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, great.
Or Tucker,
Yeah.
Caitlin, Texas.
All right.
Minnesota.
Okay.
Georgia.
Georgia.
North Carolina.
Illinois.
North Carolina.
Indiana.
Illinois.
North Carolina.
Maryland.
All right.
And Illinois.
All
And
right.
then a Wisconsin. She's gone to get some.
Okay. And all of you, is it the first time being in northern Minnesota?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, no. Yeah. No. Well, while you're here, yeah. While you're here, just enjoy the woods, woods, water, and wildlife. This is.
Oh, thank
our
you.
Welcome to the last 2023 Steam in the Park.
Congratulations.
At the best park that we're at right now. Voyageurs National Park. Yes. So we are on our own private peninsula for the next 5 days with loons and eagles bear, wolves, and fish. Well, this is a first for us because Ranger Shannon, who is the new education ranger here at Voyageurs National Park, is in charge of many things, but one is the junior angler program. And she has finagled it where she's worked with fish and wildlife fisheries, and she's finagled it where she's going to be able to tell us all about the junior wrangler program, junior angler program within the National Park Service, and she's going to teach us all her ways and how she would teach kids.
Oh, I love it.
Isn't that the coolest thing?
Yes.
That we are at catch and release. Okay, we are all covered under her right now. She has our names, and we're using her license. Plus, we're not cooking fish here.
Okay.
But
We aren't?
can we Bo, I was hoping you weren't going to be like Stephanie, but I think it's going to happen. You are just like Stephanie. Actually, Stephanie's going to be the calmer one this week, baby. Bo is Stephanie's younger sister. She wants you to know that, just right off the bat.
Right off the bat.
Yes. All right, so can we give it up for Ranger Shannon?
Thanks.
Extreme close up.
Maybe I'll stand.
Or just pull your chair over there.
I just move over here.
Yeah.
Okay, so our junior angler program has been going on here. This is our first summer we've done it at Voyageurs, but it started within the last 10 or so years. So it's kind of a newer program throughout the Park Service. But this here is our first year doing junior angler, and it's pretty awesome. So we had to get a grant in order to get the equipment and to run the program. So some of the things that we are highlighting are accessibility for fishing. Fishing has long, deep cultural roots, right? People have been fishing for thousands of years. And even though kids, even around here that live on these waterways with this world-class fishing, don't have access and don't know how to fish. So what we're trying to do is teach kids how to fish. Maybe they never learned from their parents or their grandparents. So we give them the skills, we give them the tools, we provide everything. There is at the library, if you go, you can check out poles and tackle and
See, you catch those ninja skills? I'm okay.
And in Minnesota, if you are on state park, you do not need a fishing license. So you can also at the library check out, in International Falls, check out a pass to go to the state parks. So we are teaching kids how to fish and how they can fish for free. Also for low-income communities, fishing can be a source of food too. So really making sure we can get that out there. Secondly, we want to promote sustainable fishing. That's really our big hook there. Certain things like lead-free tackle. Has anybody heard of the issues with lead? And tackle. I personally, I've been fishing for years and had never heard of this before. I guess because I'm used to saltwater, and I don't know if they just, I don't care as much for saltwater. But a lot of the weights and jigs and things like that, and sometimes hooks and spinners are made out of lead. And just like how we don't like to eat lead or put lead on toys that we give to children, same thing when that lead goes into the water, it seeps into the soil, gets into the plants, hurts the fishes, it keeps them small, not great for the plants. And then as things move up the ecosystem, and they are also ingested by birds as well. So the birds are eating the fish that have the lead, and also sometimes, especially our loons, are eating that lead tackle. So if it's bad for us and we're like this big, and then a loon is eating straight lead, it's not great for our loon populations. In Minnesota, we love our loons. We also want to promote things like, do you know earthworms are invasive species?
What?
They are invasive. So it is not good practice if you have a container of worms and you only use half of them. You should not dump it into the water because they are invasive. I know, you think, oh, poor little wormy, I'll just let you go free and live your life. But nope, they are invasive species. So in Voyageurs National Park, you may not dump any live bait into any of our lakes. If you are in the interior lakes, so on some of the bigger islands, they'll have smaller lakes, no live bait is allowed at all. Same with crawdads and things like that. We don't really use as many crawdads here. Our minnows, you cannot dump them in the lakes. Yeah, so those are kind of our big sticking points.
Didn't know that. I did not. And yeah, okay.
You say that state parks as well?
Is that like?
Yeah, I guess each waterway is going to have different rules, but we do have a handy little book.
I was going to say, when I did my Minnesota license.
This is a fishing pole. There are lots of different types of fishing poles. This is a smaller one because we work with kids. Also, we have to get them in the van like this. So they cannot be, the rule is it can't be taller than me or it's not going to fit. So we have some smaller ones. If, usually if you're going to go buy one, you're going to get a bigger one. This is called the blank. So this is your main part. And these are our little guides. So our line, our little clear string is going to go through these guides. Now the most important part is the reel down here. So these are called open face or a spinning reel. A lot of kids are used to a button or like a closed type of reel. I do not like to teach kids with those because when they tangle, it's really hard and takes a long time to get those tangles out. And I have found even the really little kids are able to catch on and use these, and kids like 4 and 5 are able to figure it out. They just need something a little smaller because it can be a little bit heavy at times. So on all of our poles today, we do not have hooks on them at the moment because it just is kind of hard to transport so many poles with so many hooks, and I keep getting hurt, so I got mad and I took them all off last week. But we have a little spinner on here. This allows to put a hook on here, and I'll let you guys pick out a hook or a jig. A jig is just like a hook with a little weight on it. Those are going to be preferable for fishing off the dock today. So I'll let you pick out your own hook that you can put on here. And I'll usually show the kids our different types of bait. Typically we would have leeches and we would have worms, but just logistically we could not get to the store and get live bait today. So we're going to use artificial lures. Our little worms are probably going to be the best out off the dock, and I can show you when we get down there how we're going to pick out our jig or our hook and then how we can put that worm onto our hook.
I'm so excited. Y'all know this about me, but Leah's can't fish. Like, we haven't been able, we don't get to do it because I'm so.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! I got it. It's big. Wow! Oh my gosh!
Wow, that is beautiful.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Congratulations. Woo! Look at him puff up. He is mad at you.
Oh my
That is
Yeah, this is a walleye I'd have to put back anyway. Let me see. Oh, here's
beautiful.
Excellent.
So I would like to introduce you officially to my friend Brianna, or Brianna, I don't know where you're from. I think Brianna's more correct. I'm Brianna because I'm from the South. Brianna and I met virtually over a year ago, probably in February, January, and we started talking about, we were on a call, she was on a call or something, and I happened to be on there, on how we could partner. And all of this happening, including the squirrels, focus everyone, there's true squirrels taking your attention, is because of Brianna. She has made, at every turn, she has helped us find equipment, programming, where we should probably get food, where the porta potty is, not the hole in the ground, all the things. So she has made all of this happen, which is very unusual that we have almost 95% of the logistics coming from the park. So we're very excited. She works for the Voyageurs Conservancy, which is like the friends group of the park. And I'm going to let her tell a little bit more about herself, and then we can introduce Shannon, and then we'll start this morning's activity.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I know this squirrel is
throwing
really...
stuff at
throwing
us.
stuff at Steve. No,
Yeah.
like get
Throwing
out of
stuff
here.
at Steve.
That's amazing.
Okay, I know it's going to be hard, girls, but turn your focus, Steve, to Brianna.
Okay, so I'm Brianna Trigg. I am the Education and Outreach Director at Voyageurs Conservancy, and it is a slightly strange situation of how
What
we
is behind?
partner.
Brianna, we might have to move. So Brianna can,
So
you're good. Pull it
I'll
tight.
tell you the story a little bit about the Voyageurs Conservancy and how we're connected to Voyageurs National Park. So Voyageurs Conservancy actually used to be called the Voyageurs National Park Association, and we were formed before the park existed in the 60s.
Oh,
And the reason we were formed was because the group that came together said, we want a national park here at Voyageurs. And they were some of the instigators that really helped get the legislation through Congress to say, this is important, we need a national park in northern Minnesota. So that's the history of our organization. At the beginning, we were more of an advocacy organization, really kind of supporting the federal government in multiple ways to ensure that this land was protected. And then we have shifted over time to become the Friends Group, and we are currently the official philanthropic partner of Voyageurs National Park.
Michelle, come over here. Okay.
And so we are, the program that we have here, why I am here with you today, is that we are, we've got a fun outdoor classroom. So about, I don't know the exact timing, maybe 7 years ago, the education budget for Voyageurs National Park got cut at the federal level, right? So kind of one of those things out of the control. So they still had the interpretation budget, but not an environmental education program. And so the Conservancy realized that this was a big gap, and one of our jobs is to support the park with funds for those gaps that occur from the federal funding. And so the Conservancy and the park partnered together to come up with a joint education program. We call it the Voyageurs Classroom Initiative. So we work in partnership with Voyageurs National Park to put on all of our K through 12 and through college programming. So my role, I work directly with Tanya, who's our Chief of Interpretation, and even though I am the nonprofit partner, I am running the education programs for the park. And so we work in deep partnership. We built a framework together. This is really nerdy stuff about the behind the scenes, but that's my favorite piece. So it has been really exciting to join as a nonprofit running programs with the National Park, and we get to work with folks like Shannon, who is our first EE Ranger since we lost the initial funding. So it's very exciting, and the Conservancy was able to write the grants for the funds that brought on an EE Ranger at the park.
And EE stands for?
Environmental Ed.
Okay.
Yeah. So any kind of education, K-12 pieces falls in the education side. So that's kind of the story of why I'm here, and the work that we're doing together, working in close partnership with the park to reach out to classrooms. And I will say also, our environmental education program in the past has mostly been focused on the gateway communities, which are relatively small. There's 5,000 people in International Falls, and that's the biggest community in the region near the park. So we worked with those rural classrooms, but we are building and expanding our reach with our education programs. Like that student I was telling you about from Minneapolis who came up to the park because they had a virtual classroom field trip with Voyageurs National Park. So that's a little bit about our background. Shannon, do you want to add?
That sums it up.
So it is very fun to be working in partnership with the park, and I do have a temporary desk at the headquarters. It's currently Shannon's in it, but we share. And Jesse Gates, who you will meet later this week, and you've probably seen on a video. He is a conservancy staff. He used to be a park ranger here at Voyageurs, and then we hired him at the conservancy to be our education specialist. So we do like really jointly work, conservancy staff and park staff.
And where are you located?
So I'm located in Minneapolis, actually, and we are the conservancy is based in Minneapolis, and then we have field fellow Moss, who you will also meet tomorrow. She's based in Duluth, and then we've got Jesse here up in International Falls. So we're a distributed team.
Do you know what the most recent visitorship numbers are for the park?
I do not. I have known them in my head recently, but I can't think of them at the moment.
Okay.
But I will say, as we are approaching our 50th, we are working hard on getting folks to know about Voyageurs National Park. Even in Minnesota, a lot of people don't know that we have a national park. One of our 63 national parks in the country is here in Minnesota, and a lot of folks don't know that. So that is a big part of our work, is building access to this place, which is incredible and tricky to access because it is 40% water, and you really need a boat to get into the park, or a good pair of skis in the winter. So I think what we're going to be doing today is actually a lesson on why Voyageurs National Park is a national park, and I have a printed out slide deck, but you all have this slide deck that we are going to go through so that you can use this in your classrooms later if you'd like. This is the one I shared on that call that I joined you on. I will tell you, you will have this. So I'm just gonna give us some pictures, and I am hoping we have enough sets of colored pencils.
Everybody should have a set.
Great, so that when we're up here. Okay, so what I'm gonna start is I wanna do a land acknowledgement of where we are, because this land has not always been a national park, obviously, as we're heading into our 49th year as a national park. The land that we are on actually has been historically associated with over 18 tribes.
Oh, wow.
And we'll talk about why that many tribes have had a connection to this land as we go through today. But the most recent stewards of this land in tribal history are the Ojibwe people, and specifically the Boys Fort band of Ojibwe, who were the folks there. I have a picture so you can see the current reservations in the state of Minnesota, and the Boys Fort band is very close. We also, the Grand Portage band and the Fond du Lac band are some of the those who have the closest relationship in this region.
Is it F-O-R-T-E?
Yes.
Boys Fort?
Boys Fort. So, if you would say it in French, bois.
Oh, yes.
Right, but it's Boys Fort is the way that the tribe says.
So it's trees. Isn't bois forest in French?
Oh.
Strong. I think it's a strong forest.
Strong forest. Yeah. So they are the kind of traditional stewards of this land, and there are some really incredible resources even on our website where you can see some of the traditional villages, and blueberries were up into as the park was forming. A lot of people, you'll still meet folks who came here to pick blueberries every year with their families. So an important history of the park. And then what I want to tell you, as I said, we're hitting our 50th year. It's 218,000 acres, 40% of it water. And we've talked a little bit about this, but named after the French-Canadian voyageurs who came through the region with the fur trade. But I want to talk a little bit about why there are national parks in our country. So what I'm going to have you do is I would like you to get into a pair and have a conversation about what do you think of when you think of a national park in our country. Why are there national parks? What are the things that come to mind? So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to talk with a partner, and then we're going to come back and I'd like to hear from you. What are the things you think of when you think of a national park? Why do we have them? Conversation. Don't trip over.
I'm not leaning all the way back.
No, I didn't know any of that.
And I just would like to hear what came up in your conversation when you think about national parks and why they exist in our country. Vastness.
Uniquely beautiful. Conservation of natural, cultural, historical resources.
Yeah. And I like the kind of call out. It's natural, historical, and cultural. We'll talk a little bit more about that too. Any other things that you think?
Protect the land, the wildlife. That includes the plant life. Preserve what we have.
Night sky.
That's true.
National parks are some of the few places where we can really still see the dark sky.
We didn't write this, but it just occurred to me. Awe and wonder. Like, so many people who don't ever go the first time they go, they're just blown away.
What were the three words Bob used yesterday? It wasn't wild and wonderful and something, but it was 3 words that he used to describe it, and I can't remember. I have to
He did. That's right.
What were those words?
have to look back at the video.
I know, guys.
Shannon mentioned that it's a good way for people to get out in nature. There's nature everywhere, but when you think of a national park unit, which there are 425 of, those are specific places they can get out into. And recreation. A lot of recreation.
Experience for kids too. Like so many kids don't get out into nature anymore. So whether that's passing it along generation to generation and having tradition.
A really lame answer. I teach 5th grade, and part of our standards is, with government understanding that there's local, state, and federal. And, there's local parks in our town, there's state parks in our state, there's federal parks. But it has to do with funding. Who's going to help keep track and maintain and, fund all of those things? So why national parks? So we can make sure that's taken care of.
Right.
Funding.
Legacy, because it's the legacy of the land and the legacy of the people here, but it's also our legacy. And I mean, especially you guys, because you get to say, hey, this was part of what I helped with. I personally helped take care of this so it would be there for others in the future.
Yeah. Amazing. I feel like these are the answers that you could be talking about at the National Park Service highest levels, because I think you really hit on what are those key things. And I think it's interesting, when I came on to work with the National Park Service, I really learned, this park was formed through Congress. There had to be an actual act passed to say this is a place that's important to preserve. And I do want to say, that word I have learned, that word preserve is really important when we think about national parks. It is not this. There are many federal agencies and state agencies and local agencies that monitor, take care of our public lands. The national parks have a very specific focus of preservation, not conservation, not wise use, but preservation, because these are places that have been seen at our highest levels as something that is vital for us to preserve for that legacy, for us to understand our history in this country, and for us to preserve these places as intact as possible. And it has that piece with connecting with visitors and people. So I talk a lot with the Boundary Waters folks, and that's administered by the Forest Service, and their focus is to keep it a wilderness area. And sometimes there's a little bit of a well, do we really want people in this place? was this what we're going for, right? Whereas the national parks, it really is about bringing people to these places and connecting them with these lands that we have seen as vital for our country and understanding like why we are here. So I think that's a really unique and special thing about the National Park Service and our national parks and our national park areas, is that we are preserving these places to educate and connect with the public too. And I will say within like the last 5 to 10 years, education finally got in the mission of the Park Service as well. So education has become kind of a newer, I mean, it's always been in there, but it's a kind of renewed focus on education as we talk about our parks. So the Park Service, as they came together, did create a logo that's quite recognizable, the Arrowhead logo. And I'm going to go through the Arrowhead logo and the components of that and tell you about what each of those components mean and how those pieces show up here in Voyageurs National Park. So what are the things specifically that were called out? The squirrels were not called out when we pulled together. All right, so first thing is the arrowhead of the National Park Service logo. And that really stands for that cultural and historical connections. So here in Voyageurs National Park, we really have I have on here the Voyageurs, obviously our name, but really the Ojibwe and the fur trade, we are connecting in this park to this system of waterways that really formed our this region. I will, and you do have this, remember, in your email, so you don't.
They're sketchy.
Yeah. Oh, the arrow. I'll get you a. Don't worry, you're gonna see this logo a lot. So the first thing I want to tell you about is the Bois Fort and the history of the Ojibwe people as the most recent. So in the range of 500 to 700 years ago, the Ojibwe people actually did not live here in this region. They were out further east, and they had a vision of a place that they needed to go, and they were told in these visions that they needed to go west until they reached the place where the food grows on the water. And a few of you, I think, know what we mean by what is the food that grows on the water.
Wild rice.
Wild rice. A vital part of our ecosystem here for humans and animals and health of our waterways. So the Ojibwe people, this is actually Carl Gaboy is a Bois Fort Ojibwe member, and there's an incredible, at the Bois Fort Heritage Center, those of you who are local, or if you come back, I would highly recommend a visit to this incredible museum. It's just down the road at Lake Vermilion. And there is this beautiful mural on the wall showing the journey of the Ojibwe people as they came across.
So how far east were they?
Country. They were over on the east coast.
Oh, that far east.
Yes. And they traveled until they found the food growing on the water, and they came here. And
Traveled by water, by land, by both?
Traveled by mostly water. And I will in fact show you that route because that is part of that water superhighway that has existed here. If you think about trying to get through these woods without a road, how did people travel before we had those roads? And it was really the easiest way to travel was on the waterways. So they traveled across the water to here, and that is a vital part of our history. And then these are maps that I have pulled from the history of the Voyageurs on there's a multi-page report if you want to read more online and about this. But this shows, you can see, here's Lake Ontario, Erie, Huron, Michigan, and Lake Superior. And then all the way up here, here's the Boundary Waters, Voyageurs National Park, and then you can see it goes all the way up to Lake Winnipeg, through Lake of the Woods, all the way up to Hudson Bay. So these interconnected waterways really stretch most of the way across the country. Right here on this, you can see that's where our Canadian border, Steve and I were talking about this, is drawn. across these waterways. So this is the historic route that when the Europeans arrived, they followed the existing routes of trade. So I told you that there were 18 tribes with strong associations with this region. Even before there were Europeans here, they were finding like oyster shells in this region. So there was a very large and thriving trade economy on these waterways that then the Europeans came in and followed. And like Bob mentioned yesterday, learned how to navigate these waters, because this is an extreme landscape, as Dacia and Steve experienced last winter when we were out at midday at 1 degree. So it's important to know how to survive in these landscapes. And I have one more picture, one more map that really shows that 250 miles to get from Grand Portage to where we are here. It's really through these, from Lake Superior. You can kind of see how you move through those boundary waters, which are more smaller lakes, and then you can get to the big water here at Voyageurs, and then kind of keep going north up to Lake of the Woods and head north. So these waterways, that history, this is part of the reason why culturally we are here. Questions about that?
So am I remembering correctly, we're not far from the headwaters of the Mississippi here? Is that right?
The headwaters of the Mississippi are further south. They're at Itasca State Park, so it's, how many miles is that from here? A couple hours drive.
About 3-ish, because I came up through there.
Yeah.
It's like 3 to 4 hours.
But those waterways are really important, and I will show you, I have a map of our watersheds in the state. We are in fact on the different side of a continental divide from the Mississippi River here. So here is,
Can I interject?
yes please.
So part of our preservation mission is preserving the canoeing traditions that we have with the Ojibwe people canoeing the waterways, and also the Voyageurs canoeing. So you saw our North Canoe parked next to where we got on the boat yesterday, and that's part of how we preserve those paddling traditions here.
And those are 10 people canoes. They are very different canoes than the one you would necessarily bring in, well, for example, the Boundary Waters with 2 or 3 people. These are 10 people canoes, and the Voyageurs canoes, they used to, remember the like 1,300 pounds of gear that they were paddling through these waters, and then putting on their backs and walking across.
And in Olympic, we were in the Salish canoes, which is another type, and we had 18 in a canoe. Ocean going. Yeah.
Wow.
All right, so the next piece on our arrowhead is the landform. So this is a mountain. We get to talk to Chris Hemstad here, our geologist, who knows this park and these rocks better than anyone. He's walked almost every step of the Capitogama Peninsula. And he will tell you a little bit about some mountains. But they don't look like mountains, but there is an incredible geologic history here. So those landforms are really important. So the geology. Voyageurs National Park is one of the few places in the world you can see 2.8 billion year old rocks. Some of the oldest rocks exposed in the world. Chris is going to be telling you a lot about this, but here's Voyageurs National Park today. As you can see, and we've talked about, it's a little flat, been scraped clean, and some big scoops happening to form our lakes with those glaciers. But before Voyageurs looked like this, it looked like this. We had some giant mountain ranges here.
Wow.
3 billion years ago, and these mountains were then undergoing a series of folds and contractions. I promise Chris is going to explain all of this really well when we're on the boat on Tuesday, but they got folded down and then scraped clear, so we can see some of the oldest history of this planet right here on the surface of Voyageurs National Park, which is really incredible, and one of the reasons that this park became a national park, because of that geologic history that is here for us to really study and understand. And then we have these, what he likes to call whalebacks. You see all these interesting rock formations that kind of look a little bit like a whale coming in, and you'll see that they are all facing in the same direction. And it is because the glaciers were moving through and scraping clear these rocks that stick out of our waters here. So geologic history, very important. Next one, they have added, anybody recognize this tree on the logo? The sequoia. So sequoia, so there is the importance to preserve the plant life of these places. So I want to just tell you a little bit about the ecosystem here and the plant life. There are 4 major biomes in the state of Minnesota. So we've got the prairie grassland, the deciduous forest, the tallgrass aspen parkland, and then the coniferous forest. And we are squarely in that coniferous forest here. And in fact, we are in the southernmost reaches of the boreal forest, which is that northern forest that has those extreme winters. It really reaches kind of like right here on the border of northern Minnesota. Coincidentally, also where the moose hang out in those boreal forests. But this is a unique forest type. Really important for us to be understanding and studying, especially as climate change happens. Because the boreal forest is going to be one of those forest ecosystems that changes the most. Because it depends on those really cold winters to function. But this is a prime example of a boreal forest here in northern Minnesota. All right, and then we add the bison. So what are the animals that make a national park unique? That is another key piece. Squirrels. Those Douglas squirrels. So obviously we have the wolf in Voyageurs National Park, and as Bob mentioned, in the lower 48, the only place that they were not extirpated by hunting when Europeans arrived here. So our wolves have always been here, and we have some robust wolf packs. But we also have some other incredible animals here in this park. We have our loons, we have porcupine, we have the bald eagles, and in fact some of the studies understanding bald eagle populations started here in Voyageurs National Park as the park began. If you go talk to Lee Grimm in International Falls, he'll tell you about how the park opened, and he was a biology professor at Rainy River Community College, and he walked into the park office and said, "I think you need to hire me. I need to study these bald eagles." And they did. And they started the bald eagle study here in Voyageurs National Park as the park was founded, to understand the bald eagle population and really watch its rebound as they came back.
Can I add an eagle fact?
Yes, please.
So in an ecosystem, there's like the populations always kind of fluctuate, like get bigger and then they go down. We are at max capacity eagles right now because we have so many eagles. Eventually the population naturally will go down, but right now we're at max eagle population, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Who's a predator for the eagle besides man?
Yeah, because at one time they were on the endangered list, and there were so many areas in our nation that were trying to have, like, what do you call it, like a habitat for them. And now they're not endangered. So
if they're sleeping on the ground, maybe a wolf. But other than that,
they're predators.
I
So
think,
what's
I think that was more like DDT.
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
like that
And
put
lead.
them on the endangered list.
But eventually they run out of habitat, so their numbers will drop and because of the lack of habitat, but then they'll bounce back.
pretty safe.
Yeah.
They do actually get picked on by little birds.
Crows will pick on eagles.
Not
Crows will
eaten,
pick
but
on
they'll get
anything.
picked on.
Yeah.
And the
Okay.
prey population, if something happens to it, then it goes down, obviously.
Right.
If you watch any
Murder.
birds of prey, you know, we have like the turkey vultures and whatever at our house. We have eagles as well. But as they're flying, if they're too close to some of the smaller birds' nests or whatever, the smaller birds come out and just nail them from the side. Interesting to watch.
Yeah.
Leaving Thunderbird Lodge on Friday morning, we saw a mink on the side of the road. And of course, I was like, I'm pretty sure that was a mink because we have them in Maryland. And my husband, did the quick Google. and he found that it said that they are actually the most numerous predator in Minnesota.
I would believe it. I do think we have a large mink population. And we also have lynx up here as another predator. A little more rare, but definitely present in our northern forests. Cougars and things like that would be more in southern Minnesota. But the lynx up here in these boreal forests. I also want to mention, very honorable mention, of the beaver. The beaver is, in fact, next to humans, the animal that influences their environment the most. They will actually change the look of the ecosystem. And one of the beautiful things of Voyageurs National Park is that the beavers have rebounded from the fur trade when they were hunted very close to extinction. And the reason we have the ecosystem we do is largely because of the beavers. Their construction of beaver ponds and beaver dams and all of that changes the ecosystem more than any other animal except for humans. So they are nature's engineers, and a huge reason our ecosystem here looks like it does. Okay, coming to our last element.
And are there any moose here?
Yes, there are moose here. We have a pretty steady population. I think we're at like 53 at last year's count. And we are in this kind of the southernmost range of moose around here.
So they would come here when it was winter, maybe? Is that what that means?
No, I think it's more just we are in the area that this is an ecosystem that they can survive in. If you go much further south, it's not solid enough ecosystem. It's not wintry enough for them to survive.
Do they migrate? Do they follow?
No, they're kind of, this is the ones that live here year round, but this is about as far south as you will find them. And a lot of that, honestly, one of the reasons the moose have been doing badly recently is because the winters have been too warm. And so the ticks have been so bad that they actually lose too much blood.
Yeah.
And then
happening around Canada.
Yeah, don't forget to do your tick checks. Okay, so the last piece on our arrowhead is this little white
lake
piece. It's a lake. It's waters.
Okay.
So the water of Voyageurs National Park. And this is, again, we are 40% water. So out of the 218,000 acres, what about say 84,000 acres of water here in the park. But what's really, I love this about this, we are actually a state that has multiple continental divides in our state. So I don't know if you saw as you drove north, if you drove from Minneapolis or south, that you crossed the Laurentian Divide. So this is the Laurentian Divide here, and all the water on this side actually flows north up to Hudson Bay and up to the Arctic Ocean. If you are over here on the Lake Superior side, the water is flowing over towards the Atlantic. And then here, where our Mississippi starts in this area and goes south, this all goes down to the Gulf of Mexico. So this water is flowing north from that Laurentian Divide. And this is just a map of Minnesota watersheds. We're in the Rainy River Basin here.
And last year was record flooding here, is that right?
Yeah, very much record flooding. A lot of these islands were underwater.
Wow.
My friend has she calls it the island. She's just across the Canadian border off Rainy Lake, and they couldn't go for 3 years because it was flooded. So yeah.
Yeah.
So they fell asleep.
Oh, that's the worst. So those are the elements of our beautiful National Park Service logo.
So thanks for sharing that. I assumed each of these symbolized something, but I did not know. But that is like so neat to know like what each represents. And to clarify,
the mountain range represents the geological, the landforms. So the water, the landforms, the plants, and then the animals. That's so cool.
And then the history,
That's so
cultural.
Cool. Yeah,
Historical.
Oh, I never
And
knew.
if you, on the MPS.gov site, up in the search button, search MPS logo meanings, and then all sites, there's a bunch of lesson plans, K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12, that'll give you templates and let kids do deeper, and as they go higher into the high school, it gets more advanced in the different, and then they have kids create their own symbol for their area using the same
Well, hey,
tribe
don't
of
give
things.
away the lesson.
Oh,
Hold on.
sorry. I didn't know you were doing that.
We're getting there. Okay. What I want to say about this full thing and acknowledge one of the things that a lot of you talked about in understanding why there's a national park is that sense of wonder and awe. So another reason in our legislative document about why Voyageurs was created is the incredible scenery. Those night skies, the vistas. I just have some of our favorite pictures of what it looks like here. Sunrises, sunsets. You know, the scenery here is actually maybe not necessarily tangible, but it's a reason why this is a park. That sense of wonder and awe. Very cool.
Introduce to you now, Shannon. I know all things about EE, who is going to tell us first of all where she's from, how she got to this place, what her future dreams are, where she's going to leave, because she leaves here in September. And then she's going to lead you on an invasive species activities. How cool is that? So can we all welcome Shannon?
So I took some of you guys out lunch. I'm actually a newer ranger here. This is my first park. And I got here in June, so I came about a month later than everybody else, and I missed all the training. I was teaching for 3 years in North Carolina before this, so my school ended in May, so I finished out my contract in May, and then I came up here. So I have a history background. I taught social studies, high school, and before that, I did the AmeriCorps. So right after college, I just kind of wanted to do something different, mix it up, be outside. So I joined the AmeriCorps and I worked with Virginia State Parks. I worked for a district, so we had about 5 or 6 parks in the south middle part of Virginia on the North Carolina border. And then I went up to Pennsylvania and I did historic preservation there, and it was COVID and I was looking to kind of change things up again. And so then I went into teaching. And now I'm here. So a big part of my job is programming. So the Junior Angler one is like my big one, and then I also help with the dark sky events that we do every week. I don't really give those talks because that's not my specialty. I don't really know a lot about that. I just kind of am the muscle and help set up telescopes and check people in. I will preface our invasive species talk, but this is my first time giving this invasive species program because we have rangers that specifically do invasive species and do these specific programs, so I've never given it before. But
So go easy on her.
You'll be great. You'll be great. So, you know, we've all been there where we teach something that we looked at like the day before.
No. Never.
At the moment. So we have got 2 games for you guys about invasive species, but before we get into the games, our first one will be movement based, and we'll move over there. Who can tell me what an invasive species is? Like, what does that mean when we call something invasive?
A species that's non-native to that area, that is taking away the resources from the native species.
Exactly, yeah. And that's why they're not so good. Sometimes we think it's cool and fun to have things like roses and wisteria and crawdads.
Wisteria!
Yeah.
Hey, wisteria!
It's so pretty, but also it chokes out, you know, the native species that are so important to our fragile ecosystems. So with that, we are going to move over and we're going to play a game. So on our way over out into this kind of more open area, I need everybody to find like 3 sticks. Like this size stick would be good. So everybody find 3, and then we're going to put them in a pile over here. All right, throw them back.
You guys are all dead.
Okay, let's try this again, following directions.
Fish don't know
All right.
numbers anyway.
After 3. 1, 2, 3.
Blub.
I
Blub.
Somebody want to snap their stick in half?
I'll share my
Here. All right, so just like in the wild, right, the fish that are eating the most food are gonna be bigger fish. So if you have a lot of sticks, a lot of food, right, and our food comes in different sizes. Sometimes we're eating itty bitty little things, and sometimes we're eating bigger things. So that represents how big of a fish you are going to be. Now I need one volunteer. Tiffany?
Right here, yeah.
Tiffany, unfortunately, is a zebra mussel that has come in. So I'm gonna take all of the sticks.
What's your cues?
Man, you're eating for days.
Hey. And some of us maybe have died because we didn't get enough food. That would be you.
That would be me, yeah.
You hate to see it.
It would be Tracy.
I'm gone.
Eaten by the zebra mussel.
All right, so because Tiffany is a zebra mussel, Tiffany is going to get a good head start. So she gets a 5-second head start to eat as much as she wants. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now everybody else can go eat. All right, my little walleyes. Looking around, were we able to get as much food as we did before we had zebra mussels living here?
The zebra mussel took my big steak.
Thank you. Yeah. So if we were able to eat a lot and get really big, but maybe now we're only getting a couple sticks, and now we're all staying smaller, and have a lot more of us maybe died off now because we didn't get enough food. Yeah. And just like with any invasive species, Tiffany is going to keep reproducing.
Oh, Tiffany.
So now Tracy is also a zebra mussel.
Hey. I'm like this.
Power posing.
We are. We're power posing.
Welcome to our pond, kids.
That's right. You thought you had this, didn't you?
It was a good spring.
So
I have better vision.
Tiffany and Tracy will both get 5 seconds. 1, 2,
Block them out.
3, 4, 5. All right, well, I get in there. Eat what you can.
Woo! Yes, sis.
Delicious.
A little nubbin.
So now do we have even less food available?
Yeah.
Maybe more of the walleye have died out?
That would be me.
Or a lot more of our walleye are a lot smaller?
I'd be very small.
Yeah, so now we're small, we're sad, we're not able to reproduce as much. This can be applied to other things. Zebra mussel and walleye is specific to the issue that we have here. But you can kind of take this activity of this stick thing and apply it. They also do paper bowls.
Oh, sure.
Alright, so that concludes that. Just scatter your sticks. We're going to do a bingo game now. So we can go say the name of the plant and then 3 facts about it. And then you try to figure out which one it is and put it on there. You do not have every single thing on there. So if I read out something and you're like, that does not look like what I have, then that's possible you might not have that. And then, you know, bingo, if you get them in a line or diagonal or across, then you are good to go.
So any diagonal, so I could do those 2 and win?
No, it has to be a whole.
Because it won't go all the way up. Because there's not 5. So go 4 or 3 or 2.
Any 4. Yeah, any 4 diagonal.
Bo.
I didn't think you.
Thanks a lot, man.
Mostly things together, and I just grabbed it. Alright, our first one is wild parsnip, which you should maybe know what that looks like because it's outside, the sign outside the toilet.
Bingo.
Its toxic juices can cause painful blisters on skin. It's very toxic to cattle if they eat it, and it was brought to the U.S. because it has an edible root, the parsnip. If you need a hint, it's got a yellow flower.
Alright, our next one is a virus. The viral hemorrhagic specticemia. It's a deadly virus that affects fish in the Great Lakes. Symptoms include bleeding, bulging eyes, and bloated stomachs. To prevent the spread of this virus by letting boats and fishing gear dry off all the way before you bring it into another body. So look for those bleeding, bulging eyes. Hey, this one we might know by another name, the Asian lady beetle. It produces an unpleasant fluid if agitated or squashed. It was brought to the U.S. to eat harmful plant pests, and it likes to invade warm houses in the winter. Our next invader is the gypsy moth. It was brought here from France to produce silk, but it escaped. The caterpillars eat leaves and cause trees to be bare in the summer, and the caterpillars take their feces and make sticky messes on cars and sidewalks. So fun. Alright, the next one, you should know what it looks like now, our spiny water flea. This is one of our top priorities for invaders. You may need a magnifying glass to be able to see this exotic species. It completes with a yellow perch for the same food source. Its sharp spine is dangerous to any predator that tries to eat it. Spiny water fleas. Our hybrid cattail. So we have here our native cattails are really small, really dense. The bigger cattail are the ones that came in, and then they crossbred with our smaller cattails, and now we have this very dense, big cattail, and it creates this kind of like pad on the water, and it takes a lot of time and big machinery in order to remove these big cattail pads. So obviously an issue for boaters. It creates an unpleasant environment for the fish. They do not like to be around it. It kills the plants that are underneath these big pads. And it can provide, so a good thing, a habitat for the beaver and the muskrat and the blackbirds, but bad for boaters and fish and other plants. That is our hybrid cattail. Our reed canary grass. It kind of looks like wheat. Bingo. For real? Yeah. We didn't learn very much, Deja.
I'm not sure if that second one is real or not, is right or not.
I'll finish telling you about the reed canary grass. It was planted as a marsh hay because it grows well in wet fields. It's often the first grass to sprout in the spring, and it grows up to 6 feet tall and shades out the neighboring plants, reducing their sunlight and making them sad.
She can check, Mom, but y'all can keep playing from where you are.
Alright, some of us may have seen these before, the emerald ash borer, keyword emerald. The larvae eat the tree tissue, killing ash trees, which is one of our hardest hardwoods, from the inside out. The timber industry is suffering because so many of these ash trees are dying. Since it's such a hard wood, we need it to build things and baseball bats.
She's got bingo too. Okay.
To prevent the spread of emerald ash borer, it's important to keep firewood where it is. So if you are traveling from Texas to Nebraska, don't bring firewood with you. Only use local firewood to prevent the spread. Alright, the creepiest one, in my opinion, is the sea lamprey. It looks like it came out of an alien
Bingo.
movie. It uses a disc with sharp teeth to suck blood from fish. It has killed so many fish in the 1950s that the fishing industry collapsed. lampricide and stream barriers can help eliminate this horrible, nasty creature.
Either the Ashland River Visitor Center or the Rainy Lake do like a tour.
They should, yes. Unfortunately for me, my job is to clean out the education closet, and at least 3 times I just opened the box, and right there is a preserved fluid lamprey.
No thanks.
No trauma.
How big are they?
Yeah.
That can smell it. It's a joke.
Oh, they're that big? Oh.
This is actually what that thick.
Yeah. No, they're big and horrible.
So if you got a leechwood bag.
Yeah, exactly. That's child.
And are these all here?
They're all here? Wow. Yeah. When you go to Rainy, keep a lookout. You can see those cattail pads that they've been working really hard to remove. It's just on the other side of the visitor center from where all the boat things are happening. So if you're down there walking around before your wolf thing, take a look. All right, the next one, you should know what it looks like now, are zebra mussels. Oh, bingo. They can stick to anything. Not only are they bad for the fishies, but it clogs water pipes and boat pipes. And somehow they got here from the Caspian Sea via boat. They stuck on and then they just kind of moved their way.
I think it's like the bilge water or something like that.
Okay, we're getting closer to the end. This one looks kind of pretty, actually. The purple loose stripe has a square stem. One plant can produce 2.5 million seeds per year, and it can be controlled with loose striped beetles. It's got a pretty purpley pink color.
Are loose striped beetles invasive?
I don't know. It's not on my card.
I would guess if they're...
Does not. Those are my only 3 facts.
Because I've seen that all over, and I didn't realize it was invasive in some.
Do not confuse the loosestrife with another flowerish thing, the spotted knapweed. This one kind of looks like a thistle.
Oh yeah.
Its roots produce a toxin to kill nearby plants. One plant can produce up to 4,000 seeds per square foot.
No, wow. Is it green?
No.
It looks like a thistle.
That
What was the name of the
purple
one?
plant on it.
Which one?
The one that's
Bingo.
square. It's a purple loose stripe. Loose stripe? Stripe.
Loose stripe. And the spotted knapweed was brought to the U.S. in a seed mix with alfalfa and clover. All right, the next guy you should know, some earthworms.
Bingo again? Bingo, Mick. All the way. 5.
Bingo. I'm better at bingo than I am fishing.
Yeah, these guys are invasive. Use them as fishing bait. They break down leaf material too quickly in the Minnesota forests, and they make a type of soil that isn't so good for our native plants here. Those are earthworms. And garlic mustard. This also is a pretty flower. It's a white flower and has little pointy leaves. It sounds delicious, and it was brought here most likely for food. It likes to grow in shady areas, and it can survive in the soil for up to 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a little white flower with very
Pointy.
sharp. The European starling. This one's a bird, so it's the only bird on there.
Bingo again. I'm using rocks now because Ron didn't give me nothing.
They were brought to the U.S. because they were in Shakespeare's writings. It is not at all picky or choosy about what it eats or where it lives. And they travel in huge flocks that can destroy entire farm fields.
So I have a fun fact about those. 100. Sorry.
The rusty crayfish. They are native to Ohio and Kentucky, so if those are areas where you've been, that's okay. But they are not native.
Take them back with you.
Yeah, bring them back. It's aggressive, destroys lake plants, and eats fish eggs. People also sometimes use it for bait. Alright, this little fishy is a rough, R-U-F-F-E, little fish, not bloody bulging eyes. It's a small fish. It has a large large spiny dorsal fin. It takes the food from the perch and the walleye, so just kind of like what our zebra mussels did. So far, it's only in Lake Superior in the nearby rivers, but we want to try to keep it out. And what is it called? R-U-F-F-E. Rough? I think it's rough.
There's an orange roughy fish, so it's probably the roughy.
It's not a roofie, that's
something else entirely different. Yeah.
Alright, another fishy, the silver harp. These ones have weird looking faces with their eyes real close to their mouths. They can grow up to be 100 pounds and 4 foot long.
Get after them, Karen.
Big boys.
Get them out of the water.
They'll break apart.
We have
That's probably what you caught.
That's what you call it.
Yep.
Broke your line.
They have been known to fly into boats, causing injury and damage.
Stay away from Rodney.
Oh my god.
Those are the only ones Rodney's gonna catch.
No way, dude. My luck.
Just have a phone ready.
Right, the Eurasian water milfoil, which you might have also seen on this cute little disc. This grows in the water. It's easily spread by boats, trailers, fishing stuff. One piece can break off and then grow up to 33 feet long.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, big nuisance to boats and swimmers, right? It'll get tangled up in all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Oh, bingo again.
Yeah, we should all have most of the things because there's
Close to a
only
cover
one card left. And this one looks cute, the ox-eye daisy, but it's invasive.
I have an overall.
Cover off.
A coverall.
It was brought to the U.S. for a garden flower. It's easy to remove. People think that it's beautiful, so they don't want to get rid of it. But it just is holding space where native wildflowers ought to be instead.
And there's a bunch up in the trail.
Yep. Oh, cool.
Great.
Oh, not cool that you found them, not cool that
Congrats
they're
to
there.
Daisha for being our winner. There's your prize.
How about she got a rubber band?
Your knowledge of our invasive species. So you're all winners. For that.
Good work. Good job.
Very good.
We would never have known that you'd never have done it.
All right, my little junior anglers, raise your right hand. I insert your name.
I insert your name.
Promise to protect public land and nature.
Promise to protect public land and nature.
To show others how to fish safely and responsibly.
To show others how to fish safely and responsibly.
And to keep having fun and exploring the outdoors.
And to keep having fun exploring the outdoors.
And we're going to use lead-free tackle.
And we're going to use lead-free tackle.
All right, woo! Congrats!
I don't think from Brianna that there are actually 18 tribes of people that connect to this land. The tribe that they're most connecting to here at Voyageurs is the Ojibwe, and they're working very carefully with the tribes to see how they can support each other and how they can help tell stories. If you visit national parks, you'll probably hear a ranger say, we don't speak for the Native Americans or the indigenous peoples. We want them to tell their own stories. But for the longest time, there were no indigenous peoples working in the parks. In fact, indigenous people were not even given permission to be in the parks until just recently in history. We also know that they were the last people in the country to be given the right to vote. So as we think about how we as privileged, and in this group, white people, need to understand the stories better so that we can tell our kids the stories. But we need to let them tell us how they want the stories to be portrayed. Because right now in your textbooks, there are not a lot of stories. You may not have heard of some of the massacres that happened around the country with the Native Americans. They have asked to go back into the park so they can visit their ancestors, because they feel their ancestors through the leaves and the trees and the babbling brook and the animals. But as you know, the national parks have a lot of the national parks have fees that you pay that helps take care of the parks, which is understandable. So some parks now are waiving the fees to indigenous peoples so they can go in back to their land. Makes sense, right? So we, as I said before, we had hoped to have the stories and stuff tonight told by the Ojibwe, but we have found stories that are out there that we've been given permission to share, and a song to share too. So I'm going to start with Colleen, and she's going to tell you a legend, and this is actually in the Ojibwe Indian Museum, and that's the word they use, and we'll let you tell it, Colleen.
All right, so this is the Ojibwe legend of how the bear lost his tail. Long, long ago, there were only creatures on the earth. There were birds, bear, deer, mice, everything but people. In this long ago time, all the animals spoke the same language. And just like some people nowadays, they played tricks on one another and made each other laugh. They also helped each other. So it was with all the animals. One day, in the winter when the lakes had frozen, but before the winter sleep, Bear was walking along the lakeshore. As he was walking, he came upon Otter sitting near a hole on the ice with a pile of fish. "You've got a mighty big pile of fish there," Bear said. "How did you get them fish?" Instead of telling how he dove down into the water to catch the fish, Otter decided to trick Bear. You see, back then, Bear had a very long, bushy tail. He was very proud of his tail, and all the animals knew it. "The way I catch my fish is by putting my tail in this ice hole," Otter explained. "I wiggle it around once in a while for the fish to see it. When a fish bites onto my tail, I quickly pull it up and out of the water." "That sure is an easy way to catch fish," Bear said. "Do you mind if I use your fishing hole?" Otter laughed behind Bear's back and said, "I have enough fish. Use my fishing hole as long as you'd like." Then Otter picked up his fish and walked away. Bear carefully poked his tail into the ice hole and waited. He waited and he waited. Once in a while he'd wiggle his tail so the fish could see it. Bear waited until sun began to set, but no fish, not even one, nibbled at his tail. At last he decided to go home, but when he tried to stand up, his tail had frozen onto the ice. He couldn't move. He pulled and pulled at his tail, but it was stuck tight. Finally, he pulled with all of his strength and he ripped half his tail. Now you know why Bear has a short tail. And remember, don't always believe what people tell you.
Can you move that bag before it melts onto the...
A Tale of the Ojibwe. There lived a hunter in the north who had a wife and one child. His lodge stood far off in the forest, several days' journey from any other. He spent his days in hunting and his evenings in relating to his wife the incidents that had befallen him. As game was very abundant, he found no difficulty in killing as much as they wanted. Just in all his acts, he lived a peaceful and happy life. One evening during the winter season, it chanced that he remained out later than usual. His wife began to feel uneasy for fear some accident had befallen him. It was already dark. She listened attentively. Last, she heard the sound of approaching footsteps. Not doubting it was her husband, she went to the door and beheld two strange females. She bade them enter and invited them to remain. She observed that they were total strangers in the country. There was something so peculiar in their looks, their air and manner, that she was uneasy in their company. They would not come near the fire. They sat in a remote part of the lodge, were shy and taciturn, and drew their garments about them in such a manner as nearly to hide their faces. So far as she could judge, they were pale, hollow-eyed, and long-visaged, very thin, emaciated. There was but little light in the lodge, as the fire was low, and served by its fitful flashes rather to increase than dispel their fears. "Merciful Spirit!" cried a voice from the opposite part of the lodge. "There are 2 corpses clothed with garments." The hunter's wife turned around, but seeing nobody, she concluded the sounds were but gusts of wind. She trembled and was ready to sink to the earth. Her husband at this moment entered and dispelled her fears. He threw down the carcass of a large fat deer. "Behold, what a fine and fat animal!" cried the mysterious females, and they immediately ran and pulled off pieces of the choicest meat, which they ate with greediness. The hunter and his wife looked on with astonishment, but remained silent. They supposed their guest might have been famished. The next day, however, the same unusual conduct was repeated. The strange females tore off the best portions and devoured it with eagerness. The third day, the hunter thought he would anticipate their wants by tying up a portion of the best pieces for them, which he placed on the top of his load. They accepted it, but still appeared dissatisfied, and went to the wife's portion and tore off more. The man and his wife felt surprised at such rude and unaccountable conduct, but they remained silent, for they respected their guests, and had observed that they had been attended with marked good luck during the residence of these mysterious visitors. In other respects, the deportment of the females was strictly unexceptionable. They were modest, distant, and silent. They never uttered a word during the day, and at night they would occupy themselves in procuring wood, which they carried to the lodge, and then returning the implements exactly to the places in which they had found them, resumed their places without speaking. They were never known to stay out until daylight. They never laughed. They never jested. The winter had nearly passed away without anything uncommon happening, when one evening the hunter stayed out very late. The moment he entered and laid down his day's hunt, as usual before his wife, the 2 females began to tear off the best of the meat in so unceremonious a way that her anger was excited. She constrained herself, however, in a measure, but did not conceal her feelings, although she said but little. The guests observed the excited state of her mind and became unusually reserved and uneasy. The good hunter saw the change and carefully inquired into the cause, but his wife denied having used any hard words. They retired to their couches, and he tried to compose himself to sleep, but could not, for the sobs and sighs of the 2 females were incessant. He arose on his couch and addressed them as follows: "What is it that gives you pain or mind and causes you to utter those sighs? Has my wife given you offense or trespassed on the rights of hospitality?" They replied in the negative. "We have been treated by you with kindness and affection. It is not for any slight we have received that we weep. Our mission is not to you only. We come from the land of the dead to test mankind, and to try the sincerity of the living. Often we have heard the bereaved by death say that if the dead could be restored, they would devote their lives to make them happy. We have been moved by the bitter lamentations which have reached the place of the dead, and have come to make proof of the sincerity of those who have lost friends. 3 moons were allotted us by the Master of Life to make the trial. More than half the time had been successfully passed, when the angry feelings your wife indicated the irksomeness that you felt at our presence, and has made us resolve on our departure." They continued to talk to the hunter and his wife, gave them instructions as to a future life, and pronounced a blessing upon them. "There is one point," they added, "of which we wish to speak. You have thought our conduct very strange in rudely possessing ourselves at the choicest parts of your hunt. That was the point of trial selected to put you to. It is the wife's peculiar privilege. For another to usurp it, we knew to be the severest trial of her. We knew to be the severest trial of her, and consequently of your temper and your feelings. We know your manners and customs, but we came to prove you, not by compliance with them, but a violation of them. Pardon us. We are the agents of him who sent us. Peace to your dwelling, and adieu."
When they ceased, total darkness filled the lodge. No object could be seen. The inmates heard the door open and shut, but they never saw more of the two ghosts. But the hunter found the success which they had promised. He became celebrated in the chase and never wanted for anything. He had many children, all of whom grew up to adulthood and health, peace, and long life. Those were the rewards of his hospitality.
So 2 different stories, one a trickster and one a legend that's tied a little bit to the creation story. So, which is kind of a cool juxtaposition of stories here. And now I want to share with you a song. So in your WhatsApp, and if somebody else, Karen, you can share with me. Let me get the words up for you. You should have the words that I probably won't be able to see up here because I'm not going to have some of y'all can share right there. Can you let me know if you see the words to the song, the traveling song? Yeah. All right, so way hey. Can you share that with her? Yeah. So it gives you the words, and then it goes into, it gives you the English translation. So obviously storytelling is something unique to each culture, but every culture has a type of storytelling. So tonight we're going to participate in a conversational group type campfire story. Okay. And you're going to lead us.
Oral tradition is important in many cultures, including our own. It's how we know our stories, right? From our grandparents or parents through oral tradition. We're going to have a little fun with this though tonight. So you're going to choose a card, and when you choose the card, you're going to think of something, a story you might be able to tell with that prompt. However, that might not be what you actually end up saying, because we're going to have a sort of progressive story. Okay, so everyone has a different topic, but we're going to see if we can connect them together to make one story. Does that make sense?
And it can be real or made up.
Yeah, oh yes, yes. Okay, all right, so pick a card, and this would be
going down the creek, and there is a moose in front of me. And I don't know where to go to get around the moose.
Luckily, Shannon had given me a map to follow, except I put the map away and I can't remember which trail goes where.
Luckily for me, I had a compass that I had picked up on a previous travel, and I remembered that I thought I should go to the west.
So I knew I had to get around this moose. And however, he was stubborn and I was stubborn, and an unlikely friendship formed. I gave him my Reese's peanut butter cup and he moved so I could move.
After that, I had an unexpected visitor. Bob DeGrosse, of all people, arrived in the woods just in time.
He's the superintendent.
Okay.
Okay. Oh. Well, thankfully, I had been training to walk a half marathon, even though I had only walked a total of 11 miles. So I asked if he would like to join me on my half marathon. And he respectfully declined. And he recommended to look up at the eagle to help with guidance. You're up. But upon looking at that eagle, there was two beady eyes looking down from a tree as acorns pelted me in the head.
And suddenly it was dark. And I felt that acorn, but I couldn't see where it came from. And then
It was a very long night of trying to find my path, trying to find where I should go. I couldn't see my compass. I couldn't find my way, so I looked to the night sky.
My first camping trip has been quite an experience.
I wish I had not left behind all of my tools that I needed to make the fire that I could have used to convince Bob to go on the trails with me because he thought I didn't have a lot of sense. But thank goodness Karen came along.
And I tell you, this was a trip that did not go as planned.
Nice job, everybody.
So we're going to do another one.
Yep.
So,
all right, I'll collect your card.
Yes.
one beautiful September morning, I embarked upon a very memorable road trip. We set off heading west towards... Your turn, Colleen.
Towards California. But as I was going through the mountain passes in Colorado, I heard a very strange noise in my car.
Sorry.
I looked at my back seat, and Bob DeGrosse was there.
Superintendent.
Yes, again.
Still.
Oh, how was my
He saw me talking on my phone, and this is when we paid by the minute. So he knew that I was going to have a $300 phone bill and no way to pay it.
So I got off the phone and decided to look up. And suddenly I see a bear running towards us.
And as this bear's running towards me, a snake decided to slither under my feet. In the car. Where I dropped my phone.
I was blinded by the most unforgettable sunset I had ever seen. Couldn't locate my phone. Knew there was a snake loose. Bob was somewhere in the back seat. And there was a bear running amok.
I had to get away from it all. I pulled over at the next stop. I followed signs on a trail that was into the woods, and I ducked down behind a tree. I covered my head, and it was the quietest place you've ever been.
And I thought we were going to the beach. I had on my bikini, and we were stuck in the middle of the woods.
And this definitely wasn't what I expected. With Bo, we were going to the beach in California, and we ended up in the North Woods listening to loons and beautiful sunsets and with a wonderful group of people.
But then Bob is now lost. And we're trying to explain to the National Park Service what happened to him. And I stood on top of a rock at Voyageurs National Park and felt like I was having a moment on the edge.
And while standing on that rock, Daisha really felt a little bit like an outsider, even though she was surrounded by people, surrounded by nature. She still felt like an outsider.
I did.
But that exact moment, she looked down and found the lost cell phone. And she was able to return it to its rightful owner, although Bob was never found again.
Just a wonderful teacher. He's still living. He's 87 years old. He taught for 30-some years and then substitute taught in another school district for another 20, 25 years. I mean, the guy's amazing. And I always remember as a kid, you know, going to Patrick Henry High School with my dad in North Minneapolis, going to the Patriots football games on Friday night. He was a football coach as well. And then after I, you know, came of age and was an adult, I'd be different places with my dad around the Twin Cities and other places. And even to this day, when I'm with my dad, and I get choked up about this, but I'll be with him, and there'll be people that'll come up to him that are, you know, 25, 30, 40, 50 years old, whatever, themselves, and they'll say to my dad, you know, Mr. Miller, you might not remember me, but I graduated from Patrick Henry High School 30-some years ago, and at the time, I was going in the wrong direction. I could have ended up whatever, but Mr. Miller, I want to just tell you, as I see you here today, that because of what you did, what you influenced, what you did in terms of a mentor, today I'm married and I've got kids and I've got grandkids or whatever it might be. I hear those stories, folks, time and again when I'm out with my dad. So my point is, there is a legacy to be had as teachers, and all of you are doing what you're doing, I believe, because you have a passion for it, and you never know how you might influence the lives of a young person, right?
Yes.
And how impactful that is. And it's not just that one student, but it's exponential, you know? The lives of their children and their grandchildren. And it's so exponential, you know, to hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands. And as you're on this trip this week, I just want to give you something to think about. And that is, what might your legacy be? You know, there's people like Jack Ellsworth that you'll see his passion, his creativity, his imagination come to life. Jack Ellsworth had no idea when he was making the flower gardens and the rock garden sculptures. He didn't know at the time what kind of impact that would be. He had no idea that the National Park Service someday would preserve what he has created out of what he was passionate about for generations to come. right? And to enjoy and be impacted and to take in the beauty that is around us. His passion was what was in his heart, was stirring in his heart. And each of you have a passion, right? Each of you have an opportunity to make an impact on thousands of lives, just like Jack Ellsworth did. You've got that opportunity to sow into young people's lives and people of all ages for generations to come. So as school teachers, I just wanted to share that story with you as we approach Ellsworth Rock Gardens, and be thinking about that. Be imaginative of what you do here, what you bring back to the classroom, the kind of exponential impact that might have, and the legacy, just like my dad was able to have, that you in turn might have for thousands of others for generations to come. So that was just on my heart this year.
And that's why we chose Mark as one of our characters in our Marvin and Huck book, and he's become a dear friend to us, and we really, really appreciate that.
Everybody, so imagine it's 1944. What was going on in the world in 1944 of pretty big significance? Yeah, a world war, right? Yeah, when a lot of thoughts and hopes and prayers and big energy, time commitment, everything was, there was a focus over in Europe, right? And the South Pacific, and efforts to ultimately bring peace to the world, right? Well, in 1944, Jack and Elsie Ellsworth, and I always wonder if that was her real name, or is that the nickname, maybe?
I thought it was real.
Yeah, it probably was
From
real.
Chicago, man.
Yeah,
I thought it was
Elsie Ellsworth. Yeah, Jack's wife. They came here for their first summer during World War II, and looked upon this property here, and I would imagine had a vision, right? A vision for what it could become, how they might spend summers here. That coincidentally happened to be the very same year that my grandfather and my grandmother in 1944 looked upon a couple hundred feet of lakeshore property on a lake called Cross Lake, part of the Whitefish chain of lakes just north of Brainerd, Minnesota. And they saw that lakeshore property, and they had a vision as well. A vision where they might build a cabin and a place where they could spend summers with their children. My dad, his twin brother, and two sisters, my aunts and uncles. And following after that, a second cabin. Following after that, another generation, and another generation, and another generation. Today, that particular place on that particular lake is now seeing its fifth generation enjoying the shores of Cross Lake. It's come from an original vision that my grandparents had, of a place that people could gather, a place for family and friends, that they might draw inspiration from what was the very first place on that whole west shore of Cross Lake. Now it's sort of like a up north version of Lake Minnetonka, just outside of Minneapolis, if anybody knows that particular lake. In other words, there's year-round homes all up and down Cross Lake and Whitefish and Rush Lake and all of this. Here on Lake Cabotogama, there are homes, right, on the kind of west-southwest part of the shore, but you don't see cabins. You don't see much for development other than a handful of official visitor destinations such as the Ellsworth Rock Gardens. But it all starts with a vision, right? Whether it's what my grandparents had, whether it's a vision such as Jack and Elsie Ellsworth, what they had for this particular lakeshore property, that they too would return to year after year and spend about 22 years on here. So we're going to walk up this ramp in a moment. I would encourage you to stay on the path and take a look at some of these interpretive signs as you're making our way up. And then there is a restroom, by the way. You'll see it just on top of the hill. Feel free to use that. And then in a few minutes, we'll kind of meet out in the middle of the meadow, the little grassier area there. But think about that as well. Think about vision. Think about imagination. And I know Jenny, she probably knows even more than me about the intricacies of what we're about to experience this morning. But I wanted to throw the ball over to her and cast some vision as well for what you guys might experience here.
Well, I just want to invite you all to do what Mark was saying, follow up and read the signs. As you go out onto the grass, you're going to notice a divot. In that divot, there used to be a wooden pole. That pole has since rotted and fallen out, but the divot was created, and it was created by Jack Ellsworth, because that is the spot of his vision. So when you stand in the middle of that spot and look toward the gardens, that's what he wanted you to see. So I want you to take a chance in that spot. I'm going to drop my jacket off in there and head up. But are we going to split folks up? Half an hour? I don't know. My vision of this is for you is to imagine certain kinds of connections. Here we have a transformation. But prior to this, there was an amazing transformation too. So we have a great opportunity to connect art and science here.
That's what we're planning to do. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So if we could stay together, it'd be nice because Steve's filming and we're a small group, so we could y'all could bounce back and forth.
Cool.
Perfect.
Sounds good.
It'll be real easy to do. There'll be a point where we're climbing up the bluff on a narrow trail. Probably be a long line, but there'll be places where we can congregate as a large group as we go along, for sure.
And
try
we'll
to stay
need
together.
about 40 minutes to do our journaling activity.
Okay.
When we get back on the boat.
So what time are we getting back on the boat?
So you want to do the journaling once you're on the boat?
No, here.
Here. Okay,
We're
great.
replacing the art project that we were doing here with a journal.
Referring to, and Jenny, I'll let you go ahead. But as we stand here and look at this vantage point of the ridge ahead of us,
Take a look. Up there, as we get closer, you're going to see tons of life in the garden that was not there when Ellsworth was working on it because he liked his granite clean. So, as he worked on his gardens, he would also scrub off the lichen and the mosses, and it would gleam. So if you were looking at this back in his time, you would be seeing particles reflected out of the granite.
Wow.
This granite is a whaleback. Anyone familiar with some of our whaleback geology here? Okay, tell us about it.
But we don't know much today.
Do you want to tell us about it?
We just know it was created by the glaciers.
Yeah, Brianna showed us some pictures yesterday.
Okay, that's okay. So, it was created by the glaciers. When I talk about transformation, the reason why he gets to do this here is because of a huge geological transformation. I'm glad that was covered with y'all. Y'all know that underneath us is biotite schist, or biotite. And that is some of the oldest rock in North America, right? Okay, but that biotite over time changed. It changed with heat and pressure, okay? The first thing that happened, of course, is we had our molten earth, and there was a volcano. And up from the volcano came the lava. The lava settled out and became that biotite schist. Over time, that biotite schist metamorphed with heat and pressure into metamorphic rock like gneiss. These are things that you find here. You will find gneiss here as a form of crushed rock. Mr. Ellsworth called it frosting. He created all of the rock walls here out of some of the granite rock that he found, and he would crush it. He used only his hands and his mechanical advantage, no machinery, to build any of this. And he built the rock walls dry. It's dry masonry, so there's no mortar involved. But on the top, he crushed gneiss, which is a metamorphic rock. Again, comes from the heat and pressure of the rocks formed here. But how did the whaleback get here? That's the coolest part. The biotite schist over time, right, it's getting weathered, and these great big cracks are forming. You guys know about What happens when you put Coke in the freezer?
Ice wedging.
Okay, good. Ice wedging happened out here too and made these big, huge cracks. Underneath, because it's right on the shelf, underneath is the molten minerals. All different kinds. So up came the molten minerals that would come up and form huge blobs of granite. Sometimes the biotite schist would have a crack, and the cracks would run. And so the granite would come up and fill the cracks. That's the migmatite, and it's really beautiful. If you get a chance to see some of it, if we see it, we'll point it out to you. But this is one of the huge blobs of granite that came up. Why is it a whaleback? Because you already said. Because millions of years later, the glaciers formed, and they came and scraped it. They formed, and they came and scraped it. As they scraped it, you know, you got a big, huge blob, it's getting flattened like a whaleback. You see a lot of them out here, but this is one of the best. Some of the stuff that you see inside of there are some of those minerals that we talked about that could bubble up. Mica, pyrite, quartz, and even gold, which also spurred, I don't know if you heard, we had a very short gold rush here. When they figured out it involved dynamite, hand picking, and a lot of people dying, they decided it wasn't worth their time. So it wasn't a very long gold rush. But here we have it, all of that beautiful lichen and moss. It's teeming with life here. Would have been if Ellsworth had his druthers scraped and shined for you to come and see. So as you walk along, I want to invite you to notice that and notice all of the work that went into it. The last thing I want to say before we start our walk is that in 1959, all of these rock walls and pathways that we're about to see were finished. And Jack Ellsworth, when he came out here in May, all the way to September, every day, sun up, he was out there working. Sun down, back in bed. That's his love. What happens when you're done? You're bored. Anyone like that?
Yeah.
You need something to do? Yeah. What do you need to do?
I just continue clearing more of my forest of invasive species and keep planting more native trees.
Bingo! See? That's fabulous. Anyone else you need to be doing in order to be okay? You know, anyone else have something that it's sort of a passion, keep them going? That's Jack Ellsworth. So he's like, I'm done. He started doing sculpture. So his sculpture is made with rock all over this place. You'll see tons. Some will make you laugh, some will make you go, what is that? So we'll be interested in hearing your thoughts about that. He used rebar and he hand drilled holes in the rock. And so he would connect them with rebar and then use a little cement on the bottom to keep them shored up. With that, I think any questions about the transformation of this place to our time is billions of years. The transformation of this place, 22.
Wow.
Gotta go figure. Let's go check it out.
This, folks, is the site of the Ellsworth's home here on the Capitola Peninsula. So the Park Service was able to, as you probably note, keep their fireplace, the roof, the ceiling, the upper portions of it. Obviously these big green treated posts have replaced the walls that used to support their home. But you get a little bit of an idea of some of Jack Ellsworth's craftsmanship, you know, when you're here in this site of their home that's now used as a day-use pavilion for picnicking and all of that. Yeah, so Jenny, did you have any other thoughts about this spot?
No, I mean, I like to picture feel how cool it is. It's shady.
Yeah.
So I think this was very much sort of a getaway place for Elsie to be. I do think about her, you know, Jack being out there doing all of this.
Maybe she liked her reading.
And I don't know what she did for a living, but it was her summer. You know, if it's your summer, you know, you want to do what you want to do for it. Yeah, I know that this place we let kind of go when we first brought this into the park and got this. This was given over to the park, so we let this area kind of just fall in. We weren't going to preserve it necessarily.
Sure, yeah. So grew up in Minnesota, right? And as a young boy, started taking canoe trips along these border waters. The Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness to our east, the Quetico Provincial Park just over the Ontario line, but also Voyageurs National Park. One of my first wilderness canoe trips was when I was 8 years old, from Crane Lake up through Sandpoint, Namakan, and so on. And so for me, I always had it part of my DNA and just a love for this part of the planet. The Canadian Shield from a geology standpoint, the Boreal Forest from an ecology standpoint. Fell in love with the Northwoods, the up north. And for me, I went to school, a music degree and a business degree, and utilized that in different ways through the years. But when my wife and I reached empty nesthood, we were in our late 40s at the time, and decided to open up a whole new chapter in life. Got in with the Park Service after a number of years, right, working with youth, being involved with young adults, taking them on backpacking trips out in the mountains and canoe trips up in the canoe country here and so on. And so got in with the National Park Service to different parks out west like Rocky Mountain as a wilderness backcountry ranger, but then also Canyonlands, and would help out at Arches as well when things got busy in the Southeast Utah group, where Jenny has worked as well. And other parks included Mount Rainier, Yellowstone for the better part of 3 years, then Sequoia and Kings Canyon in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California, prior to coming here to Voyageurs in the spring of 22, which really for me represented a homecoming. To be able to come back to my home park, you know, the place that was most near and dear to my heart. So having the opportunity to, in a sense, come full circle from those early boyhood years to Voyageurs, and to be able to share a passion for these resources and all the natural and cultural history that we have here. It's just a wonderful opportunity, and gosh, to do things like today, this is what it's all about, right? To be able to share that passion with others and be in a place like this in a beautiful day such as we have. It really, that coming home and that full circle, the experience of today just really drives that point home for me, and be able to share these things.
And you bring your grandkids here too.
Yes.
So he does the social media also for Voyageurs. So you'll see photos of his little one on snowshoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Snowshoes and cross-country skis and different things all year round. Be able to share that. Took my 7-year-old grandson for a little day canoe trip.
Moss is a field fellow with the Voyageurs Conservancy, and she's also starting another fellowship tomorrow, but she is a North Shore naturalist. Ooh. And she's going to take us today on a hike, stroll, to find food to add to our make your own pasta night. How cool is that? So can we give it up for Naturalist Moss?
All right. Hello everyone. So I sent around some books. They're making their way around. All of them except for one are a little bit more general, just to North America and the different kinds of edible plants that you might find in the woods in general. There's prairie plants and there's desert plants too, but these ones are mostly focusing on the woods because Minnesota has lots of woods. One of them is the trees and flora of canoe country. You got it over there, perfect. And that is not all edible plants, but goes through some of the different more than human beings that exist in this part of the world. So depending on what plant you're looking at, what berry, what tree it is, there's different parts that can be eaten. So some plants you can eat the whole thing. Other plants you should probably only eat the part that we know you can eat. And the general rule of thumb, if you are foraging at all, whether it's berries for sure or different leaves or roots, is if it's bitter, it's a spitter. If it's bitter, it's a spitter. If you're biting into something and you taste it with your mouth and it tastes bitter, your body is telling you, no, thank you. And if you don't pay attention to that, your stomach and the rest of your body will tell you later. So listen to your mouth and pay attention to what things taste like. Sometimes berries, like maybe thimbleberries, has anyone here had a thimbleberry before? Nice. Okay, thimbleberries, they look kind of like raspberries, but what they really look like are thimbles. They have these big palmate leaves. Palmate meaning, like, if you picture a maple leaf, it's got those 3 points. It kind of looks like a palm. Thimbleberries have really, really big leaves, and their leaves are actually good for all sorts of things. Not necessarily eating, but if you don't have toilet paper in the woods, these abundant leaves work really well. Same thing with big leafed aster leaves, which we'll actually see so many of. Aster for your aster. Aster for your aster. They work really, really well too. Often they're within hand's reach of wherever you're going to. So as we go through our hiking and foraging path today, I will be pointing out some things that are not necessarily edible but can still be used in a lot of ways. I expect that what we will find the most of are plants that you can make tea from. This is a really big part of the history of this land. The Ojibwe people, the indigenous folks who lived here for generations, knew how to forage and eat all sorts of different plants. They learned from watching the animals around them. They learned from smell and taste and listening to their bodies, and then trying things, and as it worked and as they learned how to cook and use fire and things like that, learned how to process these different plants and use them. And we're in great deep relationship with this land, and we learn so much from them and still are these days. So tea is a really big one. There will be at least 3 types of teas that we'll explore today, and maybe some other things that we'll talk about eating. I know there's a couple of them that are back there.
And Moss, I just shared in their WhatsApp group some identifications for mushrooms, because we've been doing that around the country, so they're about the same.
Nice.
So that just in your WhatsApp.
Nice. Nice. One thing that I'll mention about mushrooms is for many of them, like chanterelles and oyster mushrooms, these are 2 that I know pretty well. The thing that they have in common that makes them much easier to identify, and so you can know for sure, is what they look like underneath, whether they have like a spongy bottom or gills. And what you're looking for with both of those mushrooms are true gills. True gills. I actually had a 10-year-old tell me all about true gills in the most comprehensive way that I've ever heard about them, right? Because he knew how to explain it well. And true gills are when the mushroom has gills that go all the way down the stem. Sometimes mushrooms just have it under their cap. And for chanterelles and oyster mushrooms, you want to make sure that the gills are all the way down the bottom of the mushroom. Those are true gills, as opposed to gills that are just part of the mushroom.
Say that again, because I missed it.
Fair. And I think when we walk, I'll tell you again. Yeah.
That was good.
So, have you seen this one?
It's the broad-leaved arrowhead. It's also called the rapato, which is the Chinook name, duck potato, swan potato, or the Swedish name is bredtillbad.
Nice. And will you read that little blurb on the bottom right side that talks about washing it?
About washing it?
It talks about if you've washed it and peeled it. I think it's on...
Oh, to prepare this starchy delight, that one? Sure. Simply wash off, then either boil, fry, or hash. Anything that can be done to a potato can be done to the arrowhead tuber. 19th century German explorer ethnologist Johann Kohl describes dried swan potatoes strung on bois blanc, or cedar, hanging in the lodges of the Lake Superior Ojibwa. Once dried, they could easily be grabbed by the handful and thrown into the boiling pot. He continues that when the Indian squaw described her delicacies to me, my mouth always began to water. Such exquisite qualities did she give them.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. So the Anishinaabe, or the Ojibwe people who have lived in this land for so long, know quite a bit about the different plants that are here. And one way that I learned about harvesting anything from this place, whether I've done it many times or it's my first time, is following these guidelines of an honorable harvest. Has anyone heard of Robin Wall Kimmerer or Braiding Sweetgrass?
Braiding Sweetgrass, one of my favorite books.
It's such a good book, and one of the, I guess, principles that she goes through is the honorable harvest, and one of the first rules is about a number. You want to share what that is?
Oh my gosh, it's been a long time. You're gonna do? It's been like 2 years.
That's all right. So it's the rule of tens. Yeah. So if you're going to harvest something, before just saying, oh, there it is, and then grabbing it, you should look around to make sure that there's at least 10 of the thing around, to ensure that you're not going to erase it from that place. Or even if there's just a few that can, you know, if there's only 4, you might take 5% of that population in just by pulling one. So I've heard quite a bit about these ones, but I haven't pulled them before. I'm pretty sure it's like similar to a tuber, so I'm going to see who's down here. If not, there's at least one other plant here that we can explore. I'm going to say hello, plant. My name is Moss. I think you're very cool. And I noticed that it's growing in sand. Just sand. Sandy, sandy sand. And I can feel the roots of it. And I'm curious because the tubers don't seem very big to me, so I'm gonna pull it up and see what we actually find here. Oh yeah, there's one. Ooh!
Are they all connected to the next plant?
Well, I'm kind of trying to do it as gently as I can, and I'm pulling up different roots that are pretty well spread out. But I notice it's not very big. So what I've learned, and we of course will double check with the book too, but what I've learned is plants like this that are often compared to potatoes, you talk about these tubers, and I see there's not very many. So maybe we can look into it a little bit more when we're...
Could that have anything to do with the soil condition?
It might, and it might have to do with how deep things are too. But we'll start with this one, and I recommend maybe just passing it and smelling it. And I'm gonna step. I forgot. Okay.
It's the broad-leaved arrowhead. It's also called the rapata, which is the Chinook name, duck potato, swan potato, or the Swedish name is bredtilbad.
Nice. And will you read that little blurb on the bottom right side that talks about washing it?
About washing it?
It talks about if you've washed it and peeled it. I think it's on...
Oh, to prepare this starchy delight, that one? Sure. Simply wash off, then either boil, fry, or hash. Anything that can be done to a potato can be done to the arrowhead tuber. 19th century German explorer ethnologist Johann Kohl describes dried swan potatoes strung on bois blanc or cedar hanging in the lodges of the Lake Superior Ojibwa. Once dried, they could easily be grabbed by the handful and thrown into the boiling pot. He continues that when the Indian squaw described her delicacies to me, my mouth always began to water. Such exquisite qualities did she give them.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. So the Anishinaabe, or the Ojibwe people who have lived in this land for so long, know quite a bit about the different plants that are here. And one way that I learned about harvesting anything from this place, whether I've done it many times or it's my first time, is following these guidelines of an honorable harvest. Has anyone heard of Robin Wall Kimmerer or Braiding Sweetgrass?
Braiding Sweetgrass, one of my favorite books.
It's such a good book, and one of the, I guess, principles that she goes through is the honorable harvest, and one of the first rules is about a number. You want to share what that is?
Oh my gosh, it's been a long time. You're gonna do? It's been like 2 years.
That's all right. So it's the rule of tens. Yeah. So if you're going to harvest something, before just saying, oh, there it is, and then grabbing it, you should look around to make sure that there's at least 10 of the thing around, to ensure that you're not going to erase it from that place. Or even if there's just a few that can, you know, if there's only 4, you might take 5% of that population in just by pulling one. So I've heard quite a bit about these ones, but I haven't pulled them before. I'm pretty sure it's like similar to a tuber, so I'm going to see who's down here. If not, there's at least one other plant here that we can explore. And I'm going to say hello, plant. My name is Moss. I think you're very cool. And I noticed that it's growing in sand. Just sand. Sandy, sandy sand. And I can feel the roots of it. And I'm curious because the tubers don't seem very big to me, so I'm gonna pull it up and see what we actually find here. Oh yeah, there's one. Ooh!
Are they all connected to the next plant?
Well, I'm kind of trying to do it as gently as I can, and I'm pulling up different roots that are pretty well spread out. But I notice it's not very big. So what I've learned, and we of course will double check with the book too, but what I've learned is plants like this that are often compared to potatoes, you talk about these tubers, and I see there's not very many. So maybe we can look into it a little bit more when we're...
Could that have anything to do with the soil condition?
It might, and it might have to do with how deep things are too. But we'll start with this one, and I recommend maybe just passing it and smelling it. And I'm gonna step. I think off. Okay. Yeah. So let's see what we got here.
So that other thing is an American burrweed.
American burrweed?
It's also known as 3-square burrweed.
Cool. Interesting. Yeah, it's not one that I've seen before. At least
it's native here.
That's good. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'll pass around a couple shoots here. The part that you want to snack on is right close to the bottom here. So I'll pass this part around.
Like celery.
And you know what I'll do is I'll even cut off the bottom so we can have a better look at it.
Looks like celery.
Yeah,
it looks like celery. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a whole pond if everybody wants to come pull my cattails for me. And
Are they invasive cattails?
But has integrated itself relatively well with our ecosystem. The Ojibwe people know this plant as white man's footprint because it just tended to follow where settlers were coming into. It is similar to other plants that tend to be solutions for a problem.
Volunteers tribute.
Yeah? All right, well come on over here. What I'm gonna have you do.
We're not gonna have that one girl who's never had a mosquito bite.
On your arm?
So what I'll have you do is take this leaf and chew it up. Don't swallow, just chew it up.
I volunteer.
He pulls up his pant leg and starts chewing up.
So the enzymes in your mouth actually help it work better.
How's it taste?
You can do
Sweet.
Yeah,
Bitter?
you can do water
It's
and
bitter.
mash it up if you really don't want to be putting it in your mouth, but the enzymes in your mouth and in your spit help activate it a little bit more. Okay, so now you can take that out of your mouth and stick it on your bug bite, wherever it is.
Oh, there's many.
You can rub it around, use it as just kind of a salve, and sometimes what you can do also is you take another leaf and slap it right on top.
That's your Band-Aid.
As your Band-Aid. But it might not stay super well, and that's okay. Yeah, that's all right. But the enzymes in plantain really help to counteract the itchiness and the inflammation, and they also isolate the poison, if there's poison, from spreading through your system. One other thing. Really everlasting, yeah! They're nice and papery. They're really beautiful, and they're called pearly everlasting because they last through the whole winter. Yeah, because they're not made of the same thing as like petals It's just this papery kind of substance. I have them hanging in my house usually all through the whole winter. They're really beautiful. And
this is a really large patch.
It sure is.
Yeah.
It sure is. And if you wanted to take one home and preserve it, there's more than 10 here. So it's a really nice right now. This tree, anyone know the name of this one?
Cedar?
Cedar. Cedar. It's a cedar. We love the cedars. In Ojibwe, it's known as Nokomis Gizik.
Can you hang on 1 second, Moss? We got a couple people coming still.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's up.
If you can hear me, tap your head.
Can you guys hear okay?
Yep.
Your other notes.
If you can hear me, look up. What do you see?
Cedar.
Cedar. If you can hear me, look down. What do you see? Rock.
Pine needles. Pine needles.
All right.
I can see what looks like remains of cattail.
Good. So now in your head, look around and find 5 things you can see. Hey everybody, hi there. All right, we are next to 3 very important trees right now. We have this tree, which is the cedar, northern cedar, also known as Nokomis Gizik in Ojibwe. That translates to grandmother cedar. Grandmother cedar. In Ojibwe, trees are extremely important. They have been here for a long, long time and are here to steward us and every animal that has come after them. In Ojibwe culture and many indigenous cultures, we are the youngest siblings of creation. Everything else came before us, and we need to look to them to learn. Cedar trees are extremely important. They are often markers of a healthy ecosystem. They're extremely resilient. They are old great-grandmother trees. And they make a fabulous tea, a very good tea. Cedar tea is something that I just through hiked the Superior hiking trail. I was on trail for 45 days, hiked 300 miles, and I had cedar tea very frequently. It felt really right to be harvesting tea leaves from the place where I was. So I'll talk more about tea when we get back to camp too, because I brought some for you. Not cedar, but a different kind that I thought we might not find here. And if you are going to harvest cedar leaves, like any other, it's important to ask and to make sure there's at least 10 and that the tree is healthy, things like that. And what I often do is I'll just take the amount that I know I will use for one night. So usually I'll ask, and if it comes off with relative ease, I take that as a yes. Sometimes I ask to harvest something and there's a caterpillar on it, or there's a bee on it, or I'll pull and it just won't let go, and I take those as a no. And sometimes I'll ask again later, or sometimes I'll just take it as a I'm not meant to have this right now. So if you want cedar tea, this tree seems abundant, and oh, it smells so good. So all you have to do is drop it in a little pot of hot water. I usually do a double steep for it. So I'm going to keep it in my pocket
And
here.
that's all you need?
Is that all you need?
For 1 cup? Yeah. Just about that much. Okay. If you're while you're doing some cedar harvesting, if you want to do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about this pine tree here. This is a very cool pine tree. Have you all learned a fun way to determine the difference between white and red?
I have.
All right, tell me about it.
So I learned yesterday, our ranger friend who has left us showed me. So when you pull off a grouping, if there's 5 little thingies, W-H-I-T-E, it's a white pine.
Perfect.
And if there's 3, R-E-D, it's red pine.
Interesting. Well, yes, that's an interesting way to do it, although red pines only have 2 generally. And it's very similar to the trick that I know, which is that, but also maybe up here we have triples instead of doubles. Yeah. Our last forage.
Love how the roots are growing on this rock.
They're a type of evergreen. We're near some very cool evergreen trees here. Spruce trees and fir trees tend to look pretty similar. Spruce and fir. They have short needles. They're kind of on this similar branching system. They kind of look like a Christmas tree if you're thinking of a Christmas tree. Fir and spruce are similar. But there's another way to tell the difference between fir trees and spruce trees. And it has to do with alliterations. Ooh, I love alliterations. Okay, so if it's a spruce tree, then it has a triple alliteration. Spruce, square, sharp. Because if you pull off the needle of a spruce tree and you roll it in your fingers, it kind of has like a square cross section. So spruce, square, sharp. Okay. If it's a fir tree, it has a different saying, and it's fir, flat, friendly. Fir, flat, friendly. Because the end of a fir needle is not nearly as pokey as a spruce needle. You can make tea out of both spruce trees and fir trees as well. There's spruce tip tea, which is usually in the springtime. The tips of the spruce trees are these tender little green shoots you can actually eat, and you can make tea out of them. As well as balsam fir trees. Balsam means smelly. They smell so good, and as you're walking by, I recommend asking and taking a couple needles and smelling them. You can make tea out of them, and it just smells like Christmas. So good. Okay, magical do-everything plant that exists in most people's yards in Minnesota, and it has blown my mind since I learned about the existence of it. And the other is a beautiful wild plant, a version that has become a little more domesticated and now is in big gardens and a sign of romance. Any guess about this plant?
Roses.
Rose hip? Rose hip, right? So wild roses are all over Minnesota, and on the North Shore there's so many different colors. They look a little different. Usually they're a little simpler. They smell amazing still. And after they're done flowering, they lose their petals and they have these little balls called rose hips. I spy with my little eye some rose hips. Who can find them?
I'm on your foot.
Yep. Perfect. All right. So rose hips. Has anyone harvested rose hips before? No? Oh wow, that's great.
That was something I was wondering if it was edible earlier today. So, okay.
Right. So rose hips. These little red balls at the end of the flowering time for roses are packed with vitamin C. Packed with vitamin C. It is one of the most medicinal plants because of that property. And it's very simple to harvest them. You ask, make sure there's enough. There's quite a few around here.
And what's that called again? I'm sorry.
It's so it's the rose plant, and it's rose hips. These are the hips of the rose.
Got it.
And I'm going to open up one of them just so you can see the inside. I'll pass it around. But inside of the actual rose hip are these seeds. These seeds, and they have these tiny little hairs on them. And those hairs can be a little irritating, so I'll pass them around here. The hairs can be a little irritating, so if you are going to make them into jelly, I did lots of harvesting, of course, this year, and I just brought two things that I had found. I guess one was a gift. But this is a jar of, I guess, it's known as so many different things, but bog tea is what it's known as. It's often grown in little wetland areas, and it has this super fuzzy bottom. So I'll pass the jar around. If you'd like to take a leaf, you can. It's also known as, let's see, words are escaping me a little right now. It's also known as Hudson Bay tea. If you've heard anything about the Voyageurs and Hudson Bay Company, were another group of Voyageurs that came through. There was the Hudson Bay Company and the Northwest Company, Voyageurs that canoed through this area. And they learned from the indigenous people, this one I have less, it's more of a story. I'm not sure exactly how valid it is, but it does seem to work for me, that bog tea helps repel bugs from the inside. If you drink enough bog tea where all the bugs are, then it will help you not be as attractive to them, is the idea. So if you want to take one of those, in the fall, the fuzzy underside turns orange, which is a surefire way to know about this plant. It grows similar to some of the other plants that we've seen. I don't think I pointed any out, but it just has one stalk and then these like circular kind of leaf bursts down the stem of these really beautiful leaves. And the other thing that I have is some currants. Ooh, they grow out in the wild too. And I have some black currants and red currants in here. If you'd like to take a little handful, please do. It's so many. And they're nice and sweet and tart.
Where did these grow?
Oh, these ones came from
She's not convincing me to want to try.
No, I just had like a really sour one.
They are tart.
Yeah. These ones came from the shore of Superior. I think a little bit between Ashland and Duluth. So like kind of by the nose of Lake Superior.
You could get them. I have a black currant bush at my house, and before I can harvest any, the birds always wipe it out before I can get to it.
These ones were gifted to me, so I'm not actually sure where they came from. But red currants and black currants, very good.
So,
very knowledgeable.
Yeah. Happy to answer any questions as best as I can if you have any, and maybe we can consult books too. But yeah, also that book, Plants Have So Much to Teach Us, All We Have to Do Is Ask. I can't believe I didn't bring it. I bring it in my head and soul everywhere I go. But it is written by an Ojibwe elder and has to do with plants, native plants around the Great Lakes area, essentially. And a lot of those plants are around the whole country too. So highly recommend checking it out. And braiding sweetgrass, of course. That one's really amazing.
Yes, that's a good one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mom.
Yeah.
Thank you.